Welcome to the latest edition of Tune Diving. This is the Influencers, and in today's video, I want to dive into a genre that, as far as I know, isn't looked into too much in Tamil music, and that is the genre of tango. One song that does explore this genre though is the song Tango Kelayo from the film Kattu Illire, and that song is going to be the focus of our video today. Specifically, I want to explore the links between the song Tango Kelayo and traditional tango. How much of Tango Kelayo is actually based on traditional tango? Is it closely related? Has Rahman just made a few adjustments? Or is Tango Kelayo and traditional tango really far apart? Those are the types of questions I want to answer in today's video. So without further ado, let's jump right in. To start with, I'd like to take a more macro perspective, a more bird's eye view, if you will, by discussing the history of tango and by exploring how that connects with the instrumentation of tango. The journey of tango music mainly starts in the late 1800s, where Argentina became an economic hotspot mainly due to its fertile land as well as its well-developed transportation systems. Argentina, as a result, was thus able to attract many European immigrants, primarily from Italy, Spain, and Eastern Europe. As a result, the population dynamics in Argentina changed significantly. Pre-European immigration, Argentina was dominated by people of Spanish and African descent. Once the large influx of European immigrants happened though, the capital city of Argentina, Buenos Aires, became this decorated collection of cultures from all around the world. Because Buenos Aires became this melting pot of cultures from all around the world, this was reflected in the music of Argentina as well. Of course, tango was no exception. Tango borrowed from many other genres, whether it be Cuban dance music, or the Argentinian form of music called milonga, or polka music from Eastern Europe, among many others. The diverse influences that tango had reflects the social climate in Argentina at the time because Argentina became this melting pot of cultures from all around the world. This cultural diversity is reflected in the instrumentation of tango music as well. Arguably the instrument that's most characteristic to tango music is the bandoneon. The bandoneon originated in Germany and was brought to Argentina in the late 1800s during the immigration influx that I talked about previously. Afterwards, it became an integral part of tango music. While there are certain fundamentals that have stayed consistent, the instrumentation within tango music has changed over time. Early tango music consisted of a guitar, flute, violins, and a bandoneon. In the 1920s, this changed slightly to 2 violins, 2 bandoneons, a piano, and a double bass. During the so-called golden age of tango, the typical tango ensemble became larger, now also including 4 violins, a viola, a cello, and sometimes a bandoneon quartet as well. Since after then, from around the 1960s onwards, the typical configuration has become slightly smaller, consisting of a bandoneon, a violin, an acoustic guitar or piano, plus either an electric or double bass. Of course, it's worth noting that the configurations I've just talked about are just typical configurations and their trends rather than absolute rules. So let's compare this with Tango Kelayo's instrumentation. The main instrument used in tango music generally is the bandoneon. However, the bandoneon actually isn't used in Tango Kelayo. My guess would be that since the bandoneon is an instrument quite specific to tango music, it might have been difficult perhaps to find a bandoneon player, especially in India, where perhaps tango is not as popular as other regions in the world. Therefore, Rahman has opted for an instrument that's similar to the bandoneon in terms of the sound it produces, the accordion. On the bass side, it sounds like Rahman sticks primarily to the acoustic double bass, and this would line up with the tendencies of traditional tango. In terms of piano and violins, both are common within tango as I established previously, and Rahman uses both a piano and a string section in Tango Que Leo. Thus, in this sense, Rahman sticks quite closely to the commonalities of tango. Percussion is where it gets interesting, because generally in tango music, if you remember the instrument configurations that I talked about earlier on in this video, there was the piano, but there were no other percussion instruments, no drum set, no congas, no bongos or things like that. And tango songs in general tend not to use such instruments. That's not an absolute rule. You will hear a song later on in this video that does use the drum set, but in general they tend not to use other percussion instruments like the drum set, bongos, and things like that. But Tango Que Leo is quite different from the general tango song on this front because it uses a lot of different percussion instruments. Particularly if you listen to the latter half of the song, and I'll play you a section of the song in a second that I'm talking about. But there's this one section where there's this like quarter note kick drum pattern, something you might call 4 on the floor, this dum 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 kind of thing with the kick drum, and that honestly has very little to do with tango music. That 4 on the floor pattern is more indicative of like house music or maybe even reggaeton or things like that. So, you know, the second half of the song in general strays away from the foundations of traditional tango quite a bit. But even with all this said, there is one percussion instrument that's used in Tango Que Leo that interests me a little bit. That instrument is the castanet. Now, as I told you previously, generally in tango music, there are no percussion instruments that are used apart from the piano, and of course that includes the castanet as well. Castanets generally aren't used in traditional tango music. But in certain interpretations of tango music, I have heard the castanet used. For example, we can look at the song Hernando's Hideaway, which comes from the Broadway musical called The Pajama Game. Likewise, you can hear a bit of what sounds like the castanet in Tango Que Leo as well. This is perhaps reflective of flamenco influences coming into these certain interpretations of tango music that both Hernando's Hideaway and Tango Que Leo have, because the castanet is an instrument that is used extensively in flamenco music. So it's interesting to see, even though using the castanet doesn't line up with traditional tango, both Hernando's Hideaway and Tango Que Leo seem to have this certain interpretation of tango music, which incorporates these flamenco influences by utilizing the castanet. So, by exploring the instrumentation within Tango Que Leo, we saw that there were many similarities between the instrumentation of Tango Que Leo and the instrumentation of traditional tango music. However, we also saw that there are many differences between the instrumentation of Tango Que Leo and the instrumentation of traditional tango music. And I think these are changes he might have made perhaps to better suit the film, to make the song more appealing for a Tamil audience, perhaps, or maybe just because these were changes he felt like making to add a certain flavor to the song. But regardless, you know, we saw that in terms of instrumentation, there were similarities and differences between Tango Que Leo and traditional tango music. But one aspect of Tango Que Leo where I think the links between the song and traditional tango music really strengthen are in terms of rhythm. So let's look at the rhythmic aspect. On a basic level, in tango, it's generally a 2/4 or 4/4 time signature that is used. So, you know, based on beat cycles of 2 or beat cycles of 4. Tango Que Leo follows this trend as well. However, simply just beyond the time signatures though, there are certain specialities in tango rhythm that I'd like to discuss. Broadly in tango, there are two types of rhythm, marcato and sincopa. Marcato is a term which means emphasis or marked. This is an articulation style used heavily in Western orchestral or band music as well. If you've ever played in marching bands or something like that, you've certainly seen the word marcato before. Having a marcato style gives the song a very even and sturdy rhythm and gives it almost this marching feel. There's a lot of emphasis on the downbeats. Osvaldo Pugliese is a tango composer who has used the marcato style. For instance, we can have a look at his song La Yumba. I mentioned that there were two main types of rhythms within tango music. One was marcato, which we just talked about, and the other is syncopa. Syncopa is a very similar definition to the English word syncopation, which basically means to accent the offbeats. So in this rhythmic style in syncopa, we'll hear much less accenting on the downbeats and much more accenting on the offbeats. For example, we can take a listen to Libertango by Astor Piazzolla in order to hear an example of a rhythmic style that's more towards the syncopa side rather than the marcato side. As you may have heard there, the bandoneon and drum set really accent the offbeats a lot, and the violin's melodies start on the offbeat as well. So all in all, there's a lot of kind of accenting the offbeats, a lot of syncopation. So this could be an example of a song that leans more towards the syncopa side rather than the marcato side. Now, tango rhythms sometimes lean very heavily towards the marcato side or very heavily towards the syncopa side. But tango rhythms can be formed by mixing these two styles as well. And so tango rhythms can be formed through a combination of both the marcato rhythms and the syncopa rhythms. One such example is the habanera rhythm, of which there are two variations, the regular habanera and the 5-note habanera. So the regular habanera rhythm goes like this. So if this is our tempo, then it goes ba 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 ba. That's the regular habanera rhythm. And what you do with the 5-note habanera rhythm is you just add an extra beat. So instead of ba 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 ba, it's ba 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 ba. So there's just the extra beat added in there. And you can probably hear how the habanera rhythm, both variations, draw from both the marcato and syncopa styles, because there's an emphasis on the downbeats because it's ba 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 ba. So there's emphasis on the downbeats, but there's also those syncopated beats as it goes ba ba ba, right? So there's those beats that come on the offbeat as well. So the habanera rhythm is created by mixing the marcato style and the syncopa style. And the same goes with the 5-note habanera rhythm as well. That just has an extra syncopated beat inside it. And this habanera rhythm and the 5-note habanera rhythm is commonly used across tango music and is used in tango quelayo as well. Now, there's an interesting way in which Rayaman has approached the beginning of some of the measures, particularly in the beginning of the song. So the way he has approached the first beat of each measure in the beginning of the song. And you hear these kind of short build-ups or anticipatory slides leading up to some of the measures in the beginning. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. These anticipatory slides are called arrastre, which means to drag in Spanish. So adding these anticipatory slides, adding these arastre, helps emphasize the downbeats even more because you give it a sort of short build-up. And so it kind of brings out the marcato feel in the rhythms. And bringing out that marcato feel emphasizes the downbeats and makes it easier to dance to as it gives the music a steady pulse. And tango, although I haven't really talked about the dance side of tango, tango is really a dance-based form of music. There's, tango dance, which is really popular. So making the music easier to dance to is certainly helpful for the dancers. Now, if we listen to how arastre is used in Tango que Leo, Rahman seems to use the castanet in order to achieve that arastre effect. However, in traditional tango, as we talked about previously, there were no castanets or even percussion instruments in general. So therefore, in traditional tango, in order to achieve the arastre effect, composers generally used violins in order to bring out the arastre effect. Here's an example. Now, we've really focused on the rhythmic side of tango, and tango is quite a rhythmic form of music. However, there's also a strong melodic and harmonic side to tango as well. So let's get into that. Broadly, tango can be split into two styles, ritmico and cantando. Ritmico is based on very sharp and articulated rhythm, as the name ritmico suggests. It's based on rhythm. And this is the side of tango that we've focused on so far in this video. However, there's another side to tango, which is the cantando side. For those of you accustomed to Western classical music, you might have seen terms like cantabile. These terms are quite similar, cantando, cantabile. All of these generally kind of mean song-like and singable, and so it's very melodic and expressive. Tango songs will sometimes blend these ritmico and cantando styles within the same song in order to give the song a form of contrast, in order to give it a more rhythmic side, and in order to give it a more melodic side within the same song. And Tango que Leo is no different. There's a part of the song that's definitely based more on the ritmico side, and there's a part of the song that's based more on the cantando side. Now, diving more specifically into the melodic aspect of tango, tango songs are generally based on minor scales. As we've discussed in previous videos, minor scales generally give off a bit of a darker mood, and major scales generally give off a bit of a brighter mood. Of course, I'm just speaking generally. These aren't absolute rules, but generally that is the case. And lyrics in tango music generally talk about quite dark topics. They talk about love failures or some of the troubles and tribulations that the poor immigrants had to go through. And so in order to reflect these darker moods, minor scales would generally be used in tango songs. For example, we can look at a famous composition from a tango legend, Carlos Gardel, called Mi Noche Triste. And if you look at the lyrics in the song, it's like heartbreaking, right? So it only makes sense that the minor scale is used in order to reflect the darker themes that such songs convey. Tango que Leo, though, isn't quite as straightforward thematically. It's not a heartbreak song in the same way Mi Noche Triste was, and in fact, from what I understand about the film, the song comes at a point where Karti, the actor, is at a ball and he's kind of trying to woo the actress Aditi to dance with him and to basically to get with him, right? So it's kind of like a pickup song rather than a heartbreak song. So I don't think we can apply the same kind of thematic idea as Mi Noche Triste to Tango que Leo. But if you're wondering why tango songs tend to be set to these darker, more minor scales, it's because tango has come from this darker context. It's because traditional tango songs generally tend to be set to these darker themes. And so the darker minor scales fit that theme better. and it's just that melodic context has been attached to tango, and so even though that darker context might not apply to Tango Kay Layo, since that darker minor scale has been attached to tango, it kind of appears in Tango Kay Layo as well in order to give it a more authentic tango feel. To add an extra point on melody, a key characteristic of melodies in tango songs is chromaticism. Building melodic phrases out of chromatic notes that are right next to each other on the piano. For example, you can hear chromatic phrases in the song La Comparsita, which is very famous in the tango world, and such phrases are used in Tango Kay Layo as well. So now that I've touched on melody, let's get into the chords used in Tango Kay Layo. Since tango is such a rhythmic genre, from what I understand, harmonically and chords wise, tango tends to be a bit more conservative. So there's a set of chords that are quite common within tango, and there isn't too much deviation from those set of common chords. Tango Kay Layo is in the key of C minor for the most part, so let's use C minor as our home chord for this example. So tango songs will generally use the home chord. So tango songs, if in the key of C minor, will generally use C minor quite frequently as one of the chords. Another chord that would be frequently used is the 5 chord, which is the chord that starts on the 5th note of the home scale, which in this case would be the note G. However, tango songs are often based on the harmonic minor scales rather than the more generally common natural minor scales. So this means that our 5 chord would not be G minor and would instead be G major. And so these are two main chords that really make up a lot of tango chords. Other chords that are frequently used are the minor 4 chord, which in this case would be F minor, and the major chord that starts on the 6th note of the scale, which in this case would be A flat major. So essentially the chords that are used are the 1 chord, the 5 chord, the 4 chord, and the 6th chord. So in this case that would be C minor, G major, F minor, and A flat major. This is not to say that no other chords are used in tango at all. That would be false if I said that. But these chords generally seem to form the foundation of tango songs. For example, we can take a listen to one of the most popular tango songs that you've already heard on this video, La Comparsita. And we'll see that the chords that I mentioned previously form the foundation of the harmonic kind of foundation of La Comparsita as well. If we look at the chords in the beginning of Tango Kay Layo as well, you'll see that they're largely based on the chords I mentioned previously, although there are a few unique sprinkles that Rahman adds. saw, the majority of the chords were the four fundamental chords that are commonly used in tango that I talked about previously. The 1 chord, which is C minor in this case, the 5 major chord, which is G major in this case, the 4 minor chord, which is F minor, and the 6 major chord, which is A flat major. But he also sprinkles in chords like B flat minor, D flat major, and B flat major, which takes the song away slightly from the tendencies of chord progressions in traditional tango songs. Now, there are also quite a few key changes in Tango Kelayo, and key changes becomes a very interesting topic in tango. There are several different types of key changes that you might hear in a tango song, and they appear in various ways and contexts as well. I mentioned previously that tango songs generally start in a minor key. And so one common key change that I've heard in several tango songs is modulating or changing keys from the original minor key to its parallel major key. So basically, for example, if the song started in the key of A minor, then it would change keys in the middle to its parallel major, which would be A major. So it would change keys from A minor to A major. One example of a song that uses this parallel minor to parallel major key change is the song A la Gran Muñeca by Carlos Di Sarli. And this song, the way he uses this key change is actually really interesting. Remember before I talked about the two styles of tango, the ritmico style, which is based more on rhythm, and the cantando style, which is based more on melody and expressiveness. And I also talked about how these two styles could be combined within the same song in order to give the song contrast. Well, this contrast can be exaggerated further if you set the ritmico portion to the minor key and the cantando portion to the major key. And that's kind of what Di Sarli does in the song I'm about to show you. It's not quite black and white, it's not quite clear cut in the sense that the ritmico portions are not fully minor and the cantando portions are not fully major, but comparatively the ritmico portions tend to be more of that minor color and the cantando portions tend to be more of the major color. And you'll hear that difference, you'll hear that contrast when I play the song for you right now. Diamond does something somewhat similar in the opening parts of Tango Kelayo. The opening line, Kelayo, Kelayo, Sempuve Kelayo, the arrangements there are more rhythmic and so align more to the ritmico style. And those portions are set to the minor key, the C minor key. Right? So just like Di Sarli, the portions that are more ritmico is set to the minor key. But the line right after that in Tango Kelayo is the Unnai Pirindal line, which Haricharan sings. And that portion is a bit more like flowing and it feels a bit more cantando because you have these smooth pads and then right afterwards you have these smooth string layers that come in. So it feels like a bit more cantando than ritmico, the Unnai Pirindal line. And accordingly, Diamond switches the key to the major key. So he goes from C minor in the ritmico portions to E flat major in the cantando portions. So while Di Sarli went from the parallel minor to the parallel major, so in that song it was A minor to A major, Diamond doesn't go to the parallel major, but he goes to the relative major. So the relative major is the major key which has the same notes as the original minor key, right? And the major key that has the same notes as C minor is E flat major. So Diamond goes from C minor in the more ritmico parts to E flat major in the more cantando parts. So there's the similarity there between Desaadly and Rahman in the sense that they coincide their key change at the same point where they switch from the more ritmico style to the more cantando style, right? So at that point, the style starts to change, they change keys as well. The main difference though is the key that they changed to. Desaadly changed to the parallel major, while Rahman changes to the relative major. You might have noticed that I've generally focused on the first kind of 1 to 2 minutes of Tango Kay Layo, and I haven't really looked into the parts beyond that too much. And that's because those opening sections seem to have the strongest links with traditional tango. If you look at some of the parts beyond that, the links with tango start to fade away, to be completely honest. Like if you look at the part I'm about to play for you right now, like there seems to be very little to do with tango, in my honest opinion. But even in the parts of the song where on the whole it strays away from tango, Rahman makes sure that the link with tango never completely disappears. Like even in the part of the song I played for you, in general it didn't really sound like tango anymore, but in the middle of that portion he does throw in a couple of the habanera rhythm that I talked about before. So by throwing in that odd habanera rhythm, it ensures that there's some link between Tango Kay Layo and traditional tango, even in parts of the song where it doesn't really sound like traditional tango anymore. But in general, the opening parts of the song seem to have much stronger links with traditional tango, and that's why I focused on those parts for this video. That does it for this video, and if you have watched it all the way through, thank you so much. If you enjoyed the video, please do make sure to like, share, subscribe, and do all the good stuff, as it helps out the channel a lot. I'm of course not an expert on tango. It is a very new genre of music, so even though I did quite a bit of research for this video, there may be things that may be slightly inaccurate or things like that. I've tried my best to avoid such situations, but if any of you are like tango experts or you have a lot of experience with tango, I would love to hear your thoughts on the contents of this video. And honestly, even if you're not a tango expert, I would love to hear your thoughts on this video. If you're interested in learning more about tango, I'll include in the description some resources that I used. I took a couple of online free tango courses to learn more about the genre. There are some wonderful podcasts and videos that I used as reference, so I'll leave links to all that in the description. So if you're interested in learning more about tango, which I'd highly recommend you to do, because it's better to learn about tango from experts rather than me, but if you're interested in learning more, please do refer to the links in the description. For now though, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.